Andrea, let's first of all start off, why do Australian musicians, or when do Australian musicians need to get visas for the US?
Always. So, coming to the US, it's always important to realize that if you're not just coming to visit, literally visit, or visit for business purposes, you need a visa. We can talk about it a little bit later, but I think that one of the fallacies or one of the myths are that musicians or any artist can come to the States and just come in on ESTA if you're doing small performances or gigs or showcases. But the bottom line, the rule is that you need a visa to go to the States and be an artist and perform on any level. So anyone who's working with the artist, which a lot of them are artists themselves, everybody needs a visa. So depending on what type of visa you're entering in on, there's always usually support personnel visas that accompany that visa. So if you're coming on a P, the P visa has support personnel. If you're coming on an O, the O has support personnel. So every visa, usually in the world of artists or entertainment, has a component to get support personnel their visas. Yeah, there's lots of letters out there, but for artists, really the O visa and the P visa are the two most popular visas. The O visa is for extraordinary individuals, so extraordinary artists that can meet certain criteria saying that they are internationally recognized as extraordinary in their art. And then it's for individuals usually. And the P visa is for performing groups or groups that are performing cultural, or groups or individuals really, performing cultural related events. The O visa is, the name is very scary because it's like, well, who am I to be extraordinary? There's criteria that you can meet. You don't have to have won a Grammy or won an ARIA award. You still have to meet that you have sustained recognition in your field as being one of the top. So that can be proven by making more than the average artist. A lot of Australians make a lot more money in Australia than they make in the States. So that sometimes can be very easy to prove. You can have media about yourself. Media in the internet, that you've performed at festivals, that you've done certain gigs that were substantial gigs. You could play some pretty big, be headliners for some pretty big gigs, and then that could be you're critical to an organization or an event. So there's about 6 or 7 criteria, and if you only have to meet 3, I never suggest you apply unless you strongly meet 3. I usually do 3 to 5, but I just want to get across that it's not impossible, and you don't have to be like a Grammy winner or an ARIA winner to actually be extraordinary. Not performing, you're just coming in maybe to meet with a label or have some meetings, talk to some people. You do not need a visa. You can come in on ESTA as a business visitor. But the key is, are you performing? Are you providing are you gaining income for yourself or for somebody else? You need a visa.
Yeah, this is where, what about recording, if you're going just to record?
Recording also, you should have a visa. Now, there's a lot of gray area. So my job here today, I think, is to kind of give you the black and white. What you see in between and how you read, what you want to try or where you want to go with it is up to you. But I really want to give you the black and white rules, and then you can kind of work with those. So at least you know when you're walking up to the border where you stand and where you can kind of maneuver within the law itself. So recording, you do need a visa. You are coming to the States to do actual work. Now, a lot of artists don't get visas because they look at it as more of a meeting. But a lot of artists, that is their gateway into getting a visa, is recording. Because you don't necessarily are coming to the States always to perform. You might be coming to record an album or doing something. So that sometimes is the gateway to get the visa itself. If you're going just to studios to meet with people and just kind of, then you shouldn't need a visa because that's a business meeting. But remember one big thing that you have to understand, which is another catch, that a lot of artists will go over and they'll do small gigs here and there, or they'll do something, and then they'll think that they can use that towards their actual visa application. Can't, because you're supposed to be on a visa. So that's another thing that comes on my desk a lot, is that it's like, oh, I got all this stuff I did, and they like lay it out, it's like all in the US, and I'm like, did you have a visa? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, we can't. It's like, what do you want me to send you the shark? It's like, you can't do that because You'll be getting a deportation order the next day. So you want to be very careful about what you're doing in the States because you want to be able to use that stuff. The famous showcase exception. Years ago, well, for many years, people would come into the States and say, well, I don't need a visa because of the showcase exception. The showcase exception is really saying that you can go, it's kind of something that's been created by I don't know who and where this kind of came about, but it's coming to the States to kind of perform in front of a very small group of people, showcasing your music to see if they will hire you or work with you. It's not going to a venue and showcasing yourself to, 50, 100, 200 or more people. It's supposed to be for a very small thing. So it equates to a meeting, not a performance. And that's the showcase exception. So the thing that you have to be very careful about with this showcase exception, like if you're going in to South by Southwest or something, is that even on South by Southwest's website, you'll see that there's nothing that says that there's an exception to the rule. It says that if you're coming in to perform or do any kind of act, you need a visa. But if you're coming in just to showcase around the time of South by Southwest or any festival in the States, remember there's that really nice guy that you run into at the border with the gun and that takes your visa. That guy has full discretion. So if you look like a musician, if you carry an instrument in your hand, if he asks, well, what band do you play with? And you can't really lie and you say, the band, and he Googles it right in front of you, or he asks to see your phone or your computer to see what kind of emails are going back and forth, even though you might be really only going to meet with a recording label to have a meeting, if he doesn't think you are, you're not getting in. So just remember that even though you might have good intentions and you realize that you're only doing a showcase, which literally is a showcase, or you're going in to meet with a label, or you're just going to see some bands, the guy or the woman at the border that's meeting you, it's in their discretion to make that decision, not yours. Yeah, it's a very slippery slope. I mean, that's why I don't even like telling people that it's okay to do that. But yes, in reality, when you're coming to do a private showcase for a few people, that's obvious, it's a meeting, it's really not, no one's earning money off of it. The best thing I've ever heard from customs when they come through is when people come through and they say artists of all type and say, hey, I'm not making any money. Like, I'm doing this for free. Like, what are you talking about? I need a work visa. And it's like, well, let me ask you this. Where are you doing this for free? Oh, in this little bar, like this little dive, whatever. And they're like, well, are they selling drinks at the dive? And he's like, oh yeah. Well, are they charging a cover to get in the dive? Probably. Well, someone's making money, so you're gonna have to get a visa.
Right.
So it's not about the artist or the person, it's about who's benefiting from this that you're bringing to the States. For the criteria, and for either the P, so the P visa is for groups. P visas are for internationally recognized groups of performers. So no one in the group has to be extraordinary, but the group itself has to be known internationally. And that really the definition of internationally is, are you known in more than one country? So it could be Australia and New Zealand. It could be Australia and Singapore, I mean anywhere in the world. And the band has to be together for at least a year. 75% of the band has to be together for at least a year. So that allows for 25% of rotation of artists in the band. So it's a nice alternative to an O visa if no one is necessarily extraordinary, but you as a band or a group are known internationally. So the criteria for both the O and the P are basically, the O is more based around those criteria which I said, like being recognized by experts in the field, making more than the average artist, being critical to an organization of distinguished reputation, being winning any awards, not necessarily the big awards, but winning awards. For the P, the criteria is more like, show us that you are internationally recognized. And usually that comes down to show me like where you performed in another country besides Australia. Show me media or publications showing that you were there and there was a big venue. So that's really all that matters. Then with trying to prove that they've been together for a year, it's usually contracts or media. So it shows the band members on the media, like this is the band members, and you see it like from a year ago, and you kind of piece it together. So the P visa obviously is about an application this big, or the O is an application like this big. So. a lot of the newer artists, I always tell them like, don't feel like you're being held back if it's not your time yet, like you're not meeting the criteria. Don't make that leap of faith and just come in and try to get through the cracks or fake media or do all these crazy things that some people have you do in the States to get your visa. What you should do is sit back and say, okay, I know I need to meet these criteria. How can I go over the next year to gather the information that I need to be able to get in the States? So instead of jumping the gun, prep yourself or prepare yourself from the beginning starting today with getting the right information. So then when you're ready, or when the opportunity arises, you go, I got it. You know what I mean? You just slam your little digital file in front of your attorney and say, or do it yourself, or whatever you're gonna do, but at least you prepped. Because the biggest mistake for even really established artists are like, oh my God, I didn't download that article I did, or that interview, or the interview's off YouTube now, I can't find it, or I don't know that manager who ran that gig, or I don't talk to that guy anymore. So you wanna like get everything in order over the, starting today, so then you have everything when the time comes. Let me give another kind of piece, a little tidbit that you guys can take out into the world with you. If you ever apply with somebody, like an attorney or a service or anything, and it goes in, and then they get back, or you get a call from whoever filed it for you and says, we got this, it's called a request for evidence, or an RFE. From the government, when you file, they send back something saying, we need more of this, or we have a question about this, or whatever. It's called an RFE, or request for evidence. If you get that back, or you get a call from someone saying that we have to answer all these questions, and it's like 3 pages long, you tell your attorney or whoever, you say, I want to withdraw my application. And you take that application to another attorney. Because then you will not get a denial on it, and obviously something was off. Either you weren't ready, you have a bad officer on the other side that doesn't know what they're doing, or, it just wasn't put together properly. So you want to pull it, so you don't get that withdrawn, you don't get that rejection or that denial on your record. The process, the actual processing with immigration process for an O and a P, you can expedite it if you pay an extra fee of $1,225 US and get an answer within 15 days. So the processing for immigration is not the long part, and not the part that takes a long time. What takes a long time is working with whoever you're working with to put together the application. So if you do what I said and you kind of gathered everything over the last year or 2 years or 5 years or whatever, and you come in and you say, here it is, then you're cutting down your time to prepping it to like, sometimes, we've done them in like 2 weeks, prepped them. Because if you're really ready, then it's all there and we put it together and we have it go. So the actual government processing time can take only like 3 weeks. And then you have to go to your consulate and get your visa, which depends on the country. In Australia, it takes about a month, sometimes less if you have an expedite. But the actual prep is what takes the long time. The costs range, the actual processing fees, we can talk very in black and white. The processing fees to do it is $325 to file an O or a P visa, and $1,225 extra if you want to expedite it and have it done within 15 days. There's always, you have to get a note from a union that is in your industry, in the music industry, and usually that no objection letter costs about $250. So that's really the fees. The only other fee you're going to have is up at the consulate, which is the visa processing fee, which is $190 or $270, depending on the visa. The O you can get up to 3 years at a time and renew it. The P you can get only a year at a time. Wow. But you can keep renewing it. So and you only can get a visa for the time that you have work. So you have to show them that you have work in order to get the period of time. So if you're coming in for one concert or one tour of 6 months, they're only going to give you the 6 months. The only way you can change your status in the US is if you're on an actual visa when you're in the US. So if you're on something called a B1, B2 visa, which is a formal visitor visa that you can get at the consulate here, and you're in the States on that, or on a different work visa. Some of you might come in on E3 visas, or have people that have E3 professional visas. or any other visa, you can change your visa status from that visa to an O or P visa in the States without leaving. If you're outside the States or you're in the States on an ESTA, you can't. You can never change your status or get a visa when you're in the States on ESTA. You must leave and then come back with the visa once it's approved. On an O or a P, you can come in and out. You're not stuck in the US on either one.
No.
You're only stuck to the itinerary that you give immigration.
So you could do an itinerary of 6 weeks this year, 6 weeks next year.
Well, you have to be careful. With the O is a 3-year visa.
Yes.
So the O,
Yes, yes.
they only give you for 3 years. Do you have to have every single day of the 3 years occupied with an event? No. But let's say you're doing a tour that's gonna last 6 months. Then you're leaving the US and you're gonna come back 2 months later and do a recording. You know, you're writing with whatever label. Then you're doing that for about 3 months, and then 2 months later you're gonna come back and do a second tour. So you can leave and come back in, but they wanna make sure that you have work that spans the 3 years, which can be hard and challenging sometimes, but it doesn't have to be consecutive every day of the 3 years. And P is the same thing. I mean, sometimes a tour will begin and then stop, and then you leave and then come back, so you can leave and come in. Yeah, but it's only 1 year.
Yeah.
So with all visas, this is our wonderful system. So we have 3 different agencies that control, which is really important for you guys to all understand. In the US, it's USCIS controls. At the border is ICE and Customs Enforcement, and outside the US is the Department of State. 3 different agencies, not accountable to each other at all. They all have their own controls, their own decisions, their own, discretion. So what happens is if you're in the US and you get an O visa, let's say you change from an O to an O1, and then you leave the US with your approval notice, you don't have a visa to get back in, and you can't get back in with that approval notice. So you have to go to your consulate in your home country, if it's a first-time issuance, and show them your approval notice, and then they, in their discretion, issue you the visa and your passport. Then you come back in. When you come back in, Customs looks at your visa and decides how long you can stay in the US, right? Because Customs doesn't always have to give you 3 years. Customs gives you whatever they feel they're gonna give you by that I-94 stamp when you're coming in the border. So 3 different agencies. So when you hear people say, well, I have to go outside to get my visa, it's one of 2 things. Either they change their status in the US, so they're in status and they're fine, but as soon as they step out, they gotta get that visa to get back in, or they're on an ESTA, and they couldn't change their status, so their sponsor applied for them. And then they have to then go up to their consulate or go down or wherever to their consulate to get the visa before they can actually come in even the first time as that visa, as that status. Ooh, scary stuff. It really depends. If you don't get a visa and you're at the border and there's an issue, either it's a very painless, which is very rare situation, they'll just say, I'm sorry, sir, you need a visa, sign here, and we're kicking you, you're going back home. Or if they think you're committing fraud or you're lying to them at the border, they could basically bar you from returning to the US for any period of time based on that. And that is kind of the worst case scenario, because then you're basically shutting a lot of doors for a long time in the future. And even though the bar is for usually a period of time, it stays with you for a long time. The other thing that you have to consider when you're making that wonderful choice of, am I gonna get a visa? Am I gonna just try to go through an ESTA? What am I gonna do? If you walk through that border and the officer doesn't like the situation that you're saying, even if it's an absolutely true situation, and he flags you, and it's literally called flagging you, every single time you come through that little border, you will be stopped and put in secondary and questioned. It is a nightmare. And the reason why it's a nightmare is you're getting off a plane for 14 hours and you're gonna be sitting there in this room with who knows who. I've had clients, stuck in there for 4, 5, 6, 8 hours, just waiting for them to talk to them, asking a few questions, sitting them back down. So you don't want to get into that situation. It's not fun, and even though you're as innocent can be, if you're flagged, it's really hard to lift that flag. you want to look for someone with integrity, with experience, and that have gotten visas for other people that you believe deserve that visa. Because there's a lot of people in the States that I've met in my office after the fact that should never have applied for the visa, and they're in a bad situation. So, and that's an example I can give too, is that I have, especially in the movie and television industry too, it happens, that they go to places and they have publicity departments, these firms, they have they have all these weird things, and they basically create visas for people that shouldn't be getting the visas. So they create the media for them, they create the venues for them, they create the contracts for them. And what happens in that case, it might sound really amazing at the time that you got your visa and you got to do that gig, but then let's say 2 years later, you get an amazing opportunity with a huge label or something, and then you end up in front of me and you're like, I gotta renew it because they want me and my visa's about to expire, and I'm like, okay, cool, bring me your stuff. And then I look at their stuff and it's all like made up. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do a visa on? Like, I have nothing here. And believe me, the big labels are not gonna go for it, like they know. So they do their own research, their counsel, and they will not allow a visa walking through their door and signing them when they know half the stuff is bogus, not real. So you don't wanna do that either. So you wanna kind of prep yourself, find someone you trust, find someone who has integrity, has experience, has been successful before, and then move through the process like that. And go with your gut, that's the main thing. Go with your gut, ask tons of questions, and the first time the attorney or the person says that you have to pay me before you ask any more questions, you just hang up the phone and say thank you, and you move to the next one, because they should sell their services to you. They should be. Yes, absolutely. Well, this is a good opportunity for me to tell. There's another fallacy within O visas that a lot of organizations try to cloud for people. When you get an O visa, you don't need like a formal manager or agent. Like, you don't need that kind of situation. You can use anybody to be your representative in the US for the O visa purposes. So it has to make sense who the person is. So you don't want like someone who's like a karate expert, or something doing your visa, but you can use anybody. So I suggest you find somebody else in the States.
I'm in the process of trying to.
Yeah, but don't worry about it being some big, I don't know who your original sponsor was, but don't worry about it being some big label or some big management company. It could be really anyone that you have a relationship in the States that would make sense to be a representative. Okay, and don't pay anybody.
Well,
Like,
I
don't.
paid my attorney in full, and then I'm sitting here.
Well, I mean, but don't get suckered into paying sponsors
Oh, I'm
and stuff.
sorry, no.
No, there's no risk for that person, but they are legally responsible for doing that visa. So if you have a fraud situation, of course, it's not the best situation for the sponsor to be in if they know about a fraud. So I would expect everyone in here is not committing a fraud. So there's really no risk. I mean, they're just basically saying that I'm a US representative, I know who this person is, I know what they're gonna be doing, I'm in the industry, I think they're incredible. And either there's a formal relationship or a more informal relationship that they're gonna be representing in the States. Well, that's a perfect example of when you want to hire or work with an attorney or someone that has a little more experience versus going with, and I'm using it as an example because everyone's in different positions. So in that situation, you want to probably look at each member separately, because possibly a few of those are extraordinary themselves.
And they have already got those visas.
Right, so they get their own O1 visas,
Okay.
and then they're coming to the States to perform with this band.
Right.
So it's not a group.
Yeah.
You want to pick them out independently. Now, if some of them, though, are not extraordinary and can't even qualify as crew, then you might do a mixture of an O with the Ps. So some are on Ps, because you can have a group that 80% are US citizens even, and one is only not, and it's still one P visa, because it's an internationally recognized group. So you can mix the Ps and the Os together. That's dodgy. I don't know what else to say.
Maybe there are some fraudulent people here.
No, but you have to understand, I hear a lot about setting up US companies, setting up US companies. And a lot of people get into this setting up US companies to avoid also withholding taxes, which doesn't work. There's a lot of stuff with setting up US companies, especially with Aussies and with the whole E3 world. But there's sometimes reasons to set up companies, legitimate reasons for performing groups, successful bands will set up US companies and we do investor visas and stuff like that for them. But no, you don't want to do that. And I think what they don't tell you is by doing that, you're costing so much more money because then that entity has to now pay minimum tax of $800 a year, they have to file tax returns, now they might be audited by the IRS. So it's like you're opening up a whole nother can of worms. It's much easier to just find an individual sponsor out there, be your sponsor, and get a visa.